All right. Well, I am so thankful. Truly, I was telling Tim that we have these these programs on our website because I was determined in my mind that we hadn't covered something. But when I went back and watched very early this morning, I was up at 4, and I thought, hey, let's just watch the program from last Sunday morning, and we'd already covered most of this stuff. And I just made one quick comment at the end, and that was, I'll just finish up a little bit of verse 10 before we move ahead. We were just about to complete all of this. We'll read this next section. Of course, you all know we were discussing last week about Paul's thorn in the flesh. And when he prayed 3 times for it to depart, we had verse 9 where the Lord said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. We had some good discussion on that. Then we talked about verse 10 quickly where it said, therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. All right, that's just that last phrase. We didn't really have a lot of time to talk about. But speak from personal experience. You guys you've had ups and downs in your life, like everybody else. How do you explain or identify with this phrase, when I am weak, I am strong? How do you identify with that? Anything comes up, anything you can recall in your life where that weakness was there when you were weak, but yet at the same time you were strong? Because that might seem like a contradiction. How can that exist, Jane?
I can remember occasions, especially when I was working, there was a circumstance where a guy would say, Gene, I wished I was stronger as you that I could do this or that. Mm-hmm. And it's temptation to him, or it wasn't temptation to me.
Okay.
But I took that always that with that experience and that happened through life, we become strong.
Right. Okay. Okay. What about a specific instance where there's weakness that is there, yet there's strength there at the same time? What do you think, Matt? I see Brad over your shoulder. Go ahead.
We do that every time. So
yeah.
I can remember I had to have surgery last year and had a lot of health problems and stuff. And physically, I was weak. I was beat down. I was worried, but I was also stronger in my faith and closer to God than I had been in a while, because I was forced to, evaluate myself top to bottom. And even though I was weak in the flesh, it made me stronger in my faith.
This is the thing we really want to keep in mind here, and this is the point that Paul is driving home. He's not talking about having a weak faith and having a strong faith at the same time. That's not what he's talking about. There are times when you suffer weakness in the flesh, but you are strong in the spirit, in your faith, as Matt was talking about. And I think that's really, and we can all think of times in our lives when we face this. Now, this weakness in the flesh could even be emotional, stress that's there, a physical infirmity. Paul had that, thorn in the flesh, and all those other things that came upon him. But it was during those times he became strong, because he mentions here that he takes pleasure in this. Now, does he take pleasure in this? Like, explain that. Does a person take pleasure in this? Oh, I'm so thankful that I get to suffer. Nancy?
Kind of understanding, knowing that in the flesh, when you are weak, when there are those times, that it's understanding to know that you have to sleep with God.
Okay, EJ?
It sounds like he's got a strong determination that he's not going to let no one pull him from God, from God's word, and he knows right from wrong, but he chose to follow God to the others.
Yeah, it's not like, and I would actually add a word to that. No one or anything is going to cause him to be pulled away from God. And I really see what you have in here is what James was talking about in James chapter 1. Count it all joy when you fall into different temptations and whatnot. Why? Because By resisting, you become stronger. The whole goal in life is this, right? This is the whole goal in life. And I'm afraid what happens is our whole goal in life is to never have this. I mean, I'm going to do everything in my power. I never, ever, ever want to have hardship. I never want to have something bad happen to me. I never want to suffer in any capacity in my life. So if I really think that way, what am I wishing for? From what we're studying here. Am I not basically wishing never to get strong? I mean, you tell me if I'm off my rocker here. But if I'm saying I never want to suffer hardship, I don't want to suffer persecution, then you never want to stand up for Jesus Christ then. Tony?
None of us want to go through those things. We don't want the hardships or the struggles and all that, However, we have to accept the fact that yes, it is going to happen, and that's when we need to be strong in spirit. Once we lose our faith and our strength, in God, that's when the weakness in our flesh and everything takes over completely, and that's when we'll fall away.
You're absolutely right, Tony. Because how many of you guys know? How many of you personally know? Because you guys ever know anybody that's fallen away? Anybody knows anybody that's fallen away? Yeah. Now, has anybody ever fallen away because of these things?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the whole point. It's a double-edged sword. On one side we say, well, I'm thankful it happens, but that could cause me to turn my back on God. I'm suffering. I've had hardship, and this, that, and the other. But on the other side is it makes some people stronger. And so we have to decide, we need to have that mindset like Paul. We need to accept the fact, if we say to ourselves right now, I cannot accept the fact that if I become a Christian, that I'm going to have hardship in my life. I don't want any part of this. And we're trying to tell them, you know what? No, that's a part of it. It goes hand in hand because that's what's going to make you stronger. But does it always work that way? We know it doesn't. And so my question is, how come it doesn't? If that's the key, if it will make us stronger, how come it doesn't make some people strong? Yes.
Because some people always look for that reason of why me. They've never really been strong.
Okay, so self-pity. That's true. Any other reason, Trey? Both. That's exactly right. Anything else? EJ? Yeah, and that's the source of it. Our faith is to accept the reality of the truth that's been told to us, and that's what we're reading here. The person just, I've heard people, if it wasn't for this, I'd be a pretty strong Christian. Is that true? Is that true? No, it's like a person, my faith would be fine if it wasn't for temptation. Is that true? No, it's not. It's a facade. You really think it's faith, but it really isn't. That which is not tried is not strengthened.
I was having a conversation with a guy the other day about the Bible and the New Testament. And one of his arguments was times have changed. And I think that's key for us. You see people that fall away that they'll say, well, this is happening to me, so why should I continue to follow God? He's allowed this to happen. But in reality, that's the beautiful thing about the Bible is, yes, we've got technology and cars and things like that, and temptations sometimes are more accessible to us. But they went through the exact same stuff that we did. They went through the lust of the flesh. They went through, Paul. Yeah. He had one of two choices here. He can either say, I was really living high and mighty as a Pharisee, punishing everybody, and now I'm being beat, I'm being stoned, I'm being thrown in prison, and times haven't changed. And they have, but they haven't in terms of the scriptures. And I think people have a tendency to just throw up their arms and say, well, it's a lot tougher now than it was, and I'm going to go ahead and step away because since I've become a Christian, this, and this happened. And you look at something fleshly like an injury or something like that, it has nothing to do. You're not getting stoned because of what you're teaching, like Paul was. This is something, just a physical ailment that has nothing to do with it.
And I think this is the mindset that you're dealing with here, Matt, and everybody. We're discussing this because I'm trying to get us to accept the facts of what will be. And I think there's a part of us, and even myself sometimes will think, if I get stronger, will this happen less? No. We sometimes think the stronger I am as a Christian, the more godly I am. You look at Paul, you would think all the sacrifices that he would have in his life that he's doing for the Lord, that those things would have happened less. I would have had less shipwrecks. I would have been beaten less for serving the Lord. You did not automatically think that I should earn something because of this. You see that concept that's there? And I think that we as Christians need to understand that the stronger we get, these weaknesses are always going to be there. It's powerful. I mean, I've never seen so many hands in my life. I think we're just all I can identify with this. We'll just go around the table here.
We can't outgrow being tempted.
No.
I mean, because there's things right now that we've not been tempted of or we're aware of as we live our lives that we're going to run into.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we live, we're going to have that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, again.
Sounds like if Paul had authority from God to deliver his message, sounds like he knew and he had some strong determination. God was not going to leave him, so his faith in God was a whole lot stronger.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because when this happens, people think God is gone. People will think God doesn't appreciate what I've been doing. Well, that's wrong. That's wrong. Tim, what were you going to say?
Let's say, I think, let's look any further than Brother Martin Evans, right?
Okay.
When he had the back surgery and all, then we saw him here on the cane and, walking through that, he's getting better and better, knowing that better days are ahead.
Right.
Well, now with this last incident that he has, he knows I've overcome that before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And things are going to get better for me, and it's built up his strength and his faith that it's nothing in the world. I'm going to get through this.
And I'll tell you, folks, this discussion is helping me this morning. This examination of this verse 10 that we're spending time talking about today helps me. Because I think there are times where, like Paul said in Galatians chapter 6, don't grow weary in well doing. Well, who grows weary in doing the right thing? The person who grows weary is the person who just says, you know what, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this always happening. Well, first of all, the temptations that we face, they're common to man. You can say nobody knows the troubles. Wrong. Nancy.
But on the other hand, though, too, you could say that if you were never tested, if everything was always constantly going right, then you would start to think, well, why would I need God? That's all good.
That's exactly right. That's the point, and it's powerful. Oh, Amy.
I think we have to accept that we're going to get tempted, because why would the devil want somebody that's already lost? Why would we be tempted if we were already lost?
That's it. I mean, you think that things were, I try to tell people that, he doesn't have to work hard on the lost. They're already lost. So once you become a Christian, you think things get tough. Wait till you become a child of God, because he does not want you to remain faithful. And these realities are there. The Lord allows these things to happen. We need to understand that. He's allowing these things to happen, but it's to our benefit. It's like you allowing your child to fall down. If you never allow your child to fall down, they don't learn. That's the whole point. That's the whole process of growth. And so just like you as a parent with your child is God with us. And it's like, okay, I don't want, yes, I could make all the decisions for my children. But you know what? They have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. And God knows what's best for us. And we say, well, why did he allow this thing to happen? It's best for you. Well, what if I fall because of it? Is that God's fault? No, because he already told us he's not going to allow you to be tempted beyond that you are able, but will make a way to escape. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. And so that accepting that reality helps us no matter what comes our way, no matter what hardship you face. We have to remember this. It can either make us stronger or make us weaker. The choice is ours, and the Lord has not abandoned us.
Something I've always done in my life is observe people 15 to 20 years older than I am. And you can learn. You can learn the ditches they fall in. You can learn this, how to do this and that. If you just observe that, it kind of help, personally,
I agree.
That's helped me.
Yes. And that's why we have the scriptures. We learn from others, right? Okay, let's go ahead and read this next section. Julie, if you want to start, we're gonna read well, why don't you just read 11 through 13, because that's actually the next section. So 2 Corinthians, we're in 11 through 13.
I have become a fool and glorying. Ye have compelled me, for I ought to have been commended of you. For nothing am I behind the very chiefest apostle, though I be nothing. Truly the signs of an apostle were brought among you in all patience and signs and wonders and mighty deeds. For what is it wherein ye were inferior to other churches, except it be that I myself was not burdensome to you? Forgive me this wrong.
All right. This covers, all that we've been talking about the last few chapters. Forgive me of this wrong. What was the wrong? He didn't take the money. Okay, that's what he said. Forgive me of this wrong. He says, I have become, we talked about this in verse 11, I have become a fool in boasting. You compelled me. I did not want to do this. You forced my hand on this. For I ought to have been commended by you. Why would he expect to be commended by these brethren at Corinth? We kind of read it. Why did he expect to be commended and not condemned by them? If anybody would know, they would. Just like us. Okay? If anybody knows you, we know you. Because we spend time around one another. And that's why Paul was talking about here and mentioning that, for in nothing was I behind the most eminent apostle, though I am nothing. Now again, isn't it really hard? Isn't it a real struggle to want to say things in all humility, but you kind of have to brag on yourself? That's really hard to do, isn't it? It's kind of like going into an interview where the guy says, tell me some great qualities about yourself. Are you comfortable with that? Seriously, are you comfortable? If you walked in and you're being interviewed for this job, tell me some wonderful attributes. Well, I'm a really good person. I would find that hard to do. But you say, well, Chuck, it's a job. You just brag on yourself for a few moments here. They understand that. Okay, I get that. I'm not saying it's wrong. But I said that to help us to understand what Paul's saying here, because he's telling them, you know what? I'm not behind any of the apostles. But really, I'm nothing. I'm nothing. I'm not bragging on myself that I'm somebody special. But you're the ones who consider me, listening to those false teachers, that I'm less of an apostle. But yet I was with you. And how did he demonstrate that that this church was not less than any other church that was around? Did he say anything in here? Well, what's all that about, Trey? Why would he need to do that? Okay, so he gave them more than enough evidence of who he was, okay? You can read about that in Mark chapter 16, verses 19 and 20. He told them, you're going to do signs and wonders in the presence of others. Why? To confirm the word. Yeah, there are people who are saying he's not really an apostle. How are you going to prove it? How are you going to prove it? Well, with signs and wonders. How does anybody today prove that they have the truth? Do I got to perform a miracle to convince you that I have the truth? What do I have to do? Give you book, chapter, and verse. Back then, they couldn't do it. Okay? Oh, they can give book, chapter, and verse, but again, a lot of people, they couldn't give book, chapter, and verse. The scriptures hadn't been written in complete form yet, like the Corinthian letter. But the point is, you're going to have to be able to prove who you are. And Paul did that. He accomplished it. That's what he said. Truly, the signs of an apostle were accomplished among you. If you want to know whether I was an apostle or not, I demonstrated it over and over to you. There should have been zero doubt as to who I was and with these mighty deeds. Look at 13. For what is it in which you were inferior to other churches? Good challenge. Oh, we're not like the other churches. What was it, guys? What was it again? Same question I've asked every week. That was such a big deal, wasn't it? Why was it such a big deal? Can anybody piece this together? Why it was? I think we've got some insight on it. Why was it such a big deal to them? You didn't take our money, Nancy.
I think the false teachers kept pointing it out, so they started to believe it.
I'm telling you guys, when you hear false teaching over and over, and you don't hear the other side, you ever go to a debate and all you're going to hear is one side? You're going to be swayed. You need somebody to get back up and say, did you listen to really what he just said here? Let me just point you out some flaws. Oh, right. They're not getting that. It's not like, I'm going to send Paul an email. I mean, how much time have they had since Paul's been away? And these false teachers are constantly filling their head with the fact that he's not really an apostle. He labored here and never took a dime of your money. That proves it right there. And they took a hold of that. Hook, line, and sinker. Matt.
We still see it today with churches. I know churches that I've been a member of in the past where I hear stuff that's going on now, and it's important to remember that doesn't mean people can't change, but it's important to remember what you witness. The joke goes that the further you get from catching a fish, the bigger and bigger and bigger that fish gets, and the further they get away from their initial times with Paul, and the more the false teachers say, well, what about this? What about this? They're not thinking back to, or they're saying, what about this? They're not thinking back to what did we actually witness? And that's kind of what he's saying here is, you guys saw it, like you witnessed it with your own eyes. Like, if I didn't take your money, okay, my bad, that's wrong on me, but you've got plenty here to see what the truth is.
And so how could anybody today, and I'm actually asking for this, okay? How could any false teacher fool us today? Don't say they can't. I'm asking you, how could they? How could a false teacher fool you today? How could he do that? EJ?
Switching the words around.
Okay, but how could he fool you? I mean, that's how he's going to try to do it, right? So how could he be successful in fooling you, Nikki?
If I let him, if I just don't.
How?
If I don't check what he says against what I have in the Bible.
All right, so the less you know, what's that mean? The less you know, the more vulnerable you are. I'll just tell you straight up. The less you know of God's word, how are you going to be able to defend it, Nancy?
Well, and then too, when they were being told all these things, it didn't sound like anybody was questioning this false teacher.
Guys, this has been the problem since Genesis 3, since man was put on this earth, created. You've heard me preach on it. Matt was talking about earlier. Times have not changed a thing. Well, yeah, sure, we have modern technology, but there's nothing new under the sun. And the problem with Eve is she never asked one question. And that really irritates me. It irritates me because I see it today. I see people not asking or questioning a person, so-and-so said that. What? Remember I told you that lady I was studying with. I mean, you're studying with her for week after week after week and getting her to understand the scriptures. And then a coworker just says to her on the assembly line, we're born in sin. And then we come to class and I show her what the Bible says. She says, no, we're born in sin. Because one person made a comment that hasn't been studying with you, and you take a hold of it. Because it's what you wanted to hear. And I'm telling you, the less you know, of course you're going to be convicted when somebody tells you something that you want to hear. Of course, the million-dollar question for me with this is, why did you want to listen to those people concerning Paul? That's my question. Why did you want to listen to them? And it could be a variety of reasons. Number one, they might have been family, friends, powerful members within the community, rich. I have no idea.
They're there.
But they're just there and they're listening is the problem. And the less you challenge, and I love the fact that I can be in a Bible study. Seriously. You have no idea. I mean, I'm not making it up because it fits my point right here. But I am serious. When I'm in a Bible study somebody that's not a Christian, and they start questioning some of the things I'm saying, I have such a smile inside of me. Good for you. Challenge me. Don't believe it just because I say it. Good for you. And I say, and I like where this study's going. But when you have somebody just in there who says, yes, man, yeah, okay, whatever. You know, they may be learning, but I'll tell you what, when somebody sits there and says, well, I'm just not too sure about that, Chuck. What about, consider this. It's a good question. Let's look at it. We do not need to be these mindless people. That's why we have these Bible classes. And I love the fact you get your hand up there and you talk about it and you make a comment. You're thinking, you're challenging, because you're not mindless robots here. This is not Church of Christ doctrine. We're talking about the doctrine of Christ, which you need to help strengthen your faith. It's not how strong I am determines how strong you are. It's how strong you are with the Word. Okay?
I think the point is that they can be so much stronger when Paul's there because they're leaning on him. Paul goes away, now it's like, okay, well, what, okay, we gotta do it on our own now, right? He's gone. And so if they don't do that, then they're going to have more questions. It's gonna be easy for Paul teachers to come in and, start, okay, Paul did away for a while, now let's go in and let's see how they do on their own. Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. And what we can do is what these brethren were doing early on. Remember the first letter? Remember the first letter, chapter 7? Did you guys remember when we were going through that study? We said chapter 7 is a rather interesting point in that book. Because not only has Paul been dealing with a lot of things, he starts chapter 7, verse 1 by saying, now, concerning the things of which you wrote me. That's what you do. You ask questions. And Paul had some questions, or the brethren at Corinth had some genuine questions for Paul. They wanted to know, well, if one of the members, husband and wife, if one's not a Christian, could they just leave them? Well, there's a good question. And Paul had to deal with that. And so the brethren sent him questions, and he answered their questions. Wouldn't you have loved this if they had just wrote Paul and just said, now Paul, it's not like we believe these guys that you're not an apostle, but could you explain to us why you didn't take our money? But that's not what you're getting here. You're getting a lot of, I have to defend myself because you're believing these guys. And what's an interesting thing, hopefully we'll get to it, and I think we will. In the rest of the reading of this chapter, what you're going to love about this is although Paul has been defending himself, he basically comes back and says, you know what? God knows. I've done this not for your sake, but for the Lord's. I'm just telling you what the truth is, and God knows what the truth is. And if you think I'm just trying to do this, oh, please believe me, please believe me. No, that's not the attitude as a teacher. Just please be. Just teach the truth. And that was his attitude throughout all this, and which you have to appreciate. And so when he says in 13, what is it in which you were inferior to other churches, except that I myself was not burdensome to you? Forgive me this wrong? This wrong? That's what it is? And then he talks about what I just made mention of when we get to verse 14. So before I leave those 3 verses, does anybody else have any comments about Paul's attitude or some of the things that he was talking about here and what he provided for the brethren? The signs and the wonders, if you have any questions about that. His whole purpose when he was there was to strengthen his brethren. He wanted to strengthen, not weaken. And you just got to be aware of it. A quick lesson, a quick point before I move on, is this tells me you just have to be on guard. Us. Be on guard. When somebody becomes a Christian, I've used this expression. I want you to tell me if you think you know what it means. When you convert somebody, they bring baggage with them. What does that mean? What am I meaning by that? Nancy?
It's baggage from your past.
What do you mean?
In your life. Everything that you've ever done. Could be home life. Could be, it's or what you've learned from other churches.
Okay. So when you become a Christian, you haven't learned it all. Okay? I mean, you can learn enough to become a Christian. You don't have to learn everything before you become a Christian. But when you become a Christian, you need to be growing, right? And so we've seen actually examples in the scriptures where people soon became a Christian and they did something wrong immediately. Simon the sorcerer. You got that wrong. And so people do bring baggage with them. You can get into a Bible class. I can remember one day was teaching a Bible, or actually I taught a sermon. This new convert didn't see it. I've learned since then as a preacher. But back in the day, you're studying with a young lady. I considered her young. And the question of marriage never came up, so, the person's studying, you take them through and they're learning about the church. They learn about the plan of salvation, turning away from sin, and they become a Christian. And then they hear a sermon. And then she comes up afterwards and says, I'm living in adultery. What do I do about that? See, they brought baggage. So my point is, you kind of want to nip that ahead of time, but you just learn. I learned a valuable lesson from that. But again, that person can learn. Was she not a Christian? Yeah, but we say, well, what are you going to do about this now? You're faced with a choice. And so we studied it, and she knew exactly what the Bible taught about, what she needed to do. Jane?
That's why it's important that if a new member comes, and wants to, join the group, Betty and I, whoever, if the elders sit down and have that conversation and wipe out those, in other words,
Immediately.
what's your marriage situation and this or that, because years could go by before that could even come.
Exactly. And that's a practice, everywhere I've been is just, when somebody wants to do that, you just ask some basic fundamental questions. What did you do to become a Christian? It's a good, okay. Person thinks they're a Christian. They're not. So, well, we need to study about that. And then we talk about them, well, what's your marriage situation, and talk about that. Because again, we don't want to endorse sin. But getting back to this, and I don't know how I got on that tangent. You might want to help me get back on track here. I don't know how I got derailed, but I was making a valid point here about baggage that is there, and you have to learn, and we need to. That's what my point was. Just be on guard. Every one of us here. Somebody, you hear something, you wanna help them. You wanna talk to them. Don't ignore false talk. Even if it's like, well, they're a new convert. Well, you need to help them. Okay? You need to help them. Or you go up to them and say, did I understand you right? Did I hear you right? And I've had, over the years of preaching, I've had people come up and say to me, did you say what I thought you said? As soon as they say that, I kind of like, what did I say? And then we talk about it and we go from there and clear that up. But again, I admire that. In person. 14 through 21. Tony beginning. Let's zip back and see how many we can do. 2 apiece.
Now for the third time I am ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you. For I do not seek yours, but you for the children also, not lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. And I will very gladly stint and be stint for your souls, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I am loved.
But be that as it may, I did not burden you. Nevertheless, being crafty, I caught you by cunning. Did I take advantage of you in any of those whom I sent to you? I urged Titus to go, and I sent the brother with him. Titus did not take any advantage of you, did he? Did we not conduct ourselves in the same spirit and walk in the same steps? All this time you have been thinking that we are defending ourselves to you. Actually, it is the sight of God that we have seen speaking in Christ, and all for your upbuilding, beloved.
For I fear lest when I come, I shall not find you such as I wish, and that I shall be found by you as you do not wish, lest there be contentions, jealousy, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambition, backbiting, whisperings, conceits, tumult, lest when I come again, my God will humble me among you, and I shall mourn for many who have sinned before and have not repented of the uncleanness, fornication, and lewdness which they have practiced.
Okay. Well, we won't finish all this, but let's back up. EJ, can you turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 4? In just a moment, I want you to read a passage from there. 1 Corinthians chapter 4. And I'm going to get you to read 14 and 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, 14 and 15. It ties into verse 14 here. Notice, I'll remind you what he says here, and then I'll get EJ to read. He says, now for the third time I am ready to come to you. Now, first of all, the third time? When was the second time? Good answer. There's no record of it. There's no record of the second time that he came. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Okay, it just wasn't recorded. And Paul has mentioned, of course, he mentioned it earlier in the book too, that he had been with the brethren before. And he says, so this third time, and I am not to be burdensome to you. And I love this. After saying all of this and the problem that was there, folks, we really need to get this, because I think our whole discussion is coming to a climax here. Falsely being accused, not taking the money. They thought that they were inferior to other churches because they didn't take the money. And so what does Paul come back and tell them now when he comes the third time? I'm not taking your money. Paul, just take their money. No. Why not? Why not take their money? Wouldn't that just fix everything? I'll tell you, it wouldn't fix it. It wouldn't have fixed it. False teachers, got him. Got him. He did what we told him. We got Paul to take your money. It wasn't he's admitting he was wrong over here, but now he's stooping. He's got his tail between his legs. Okay, I'll take your money. I love Paul here. I am not taking your money. And why isn't he going to take their money? Other than that reason.
He's like a parent.
Say he was going to pour himself out.
Okay.
He's like the children of my parents.
And we're going to get to that. But ultimately, because I don't have to. That has nothing to do with my apostleship, of approving who I am, whether I've been godly or ungodly. That is not the issue here, and they need to hear it. I mean, it's hard for me not to raise my voice with passion here, not angry, but Paul tells it like it is, and we need to understand that as teachers, just going to give in for the sake of giving in here, because it's going to actually encourage those false teachers to continue on to say stuff. I'm not going to buckle under because of them. Now, did Paul ever give up a freedom that he had for the sake of others? Yeah, remember Paul said, if eating of meat would cause my brother to stumble, was he willing to give up eating meat? He sure was. Paul was willing. He wants people to go to heaven. So what, Paul, why don't you just take their money and everything's fine? The point is, taking the money, everything isn't fine. He has to let them understand their relationship. EJ, 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 14 and 15 reads what?
I write not these things to shame you, but as my beloved sons, I warn you. For though you have 10,000 instructors in Christ, yet have you not many fathers, for in Christ I have begotten you through the gospel.
That father-son relationship that he talked about in the first epistle, he's doing it here now. He has a special bond with these brethren. He wants them to understand that there's a reason why I am not going to take this. Now, how many parents here? Come on. Be careful about this, because some of you might say, I'm all for it. But how many of you parents would really, after dinner, the son gets up and goes, what do I owe you? Or they bring out their piggy bank. I got some money here. I'll pay for my supper. How many of you parents would take it? Better not see a hand. We knew that was coming. Wouldn't it? I mean, seriously. I mean, you see a little one like that. I mean, Rowan, or somebody a little bit older, and they can barely carry their piggy bank. I want to give this to you. What does that do to you as a parent? You're going to melt your heart, right? Oh, that's nice of you, Jimmy. No, that's okay. Mommy and Dad, we're gonna take care of it. You just hold on to that. I just kind of see that. Paul wants them to understand that, you know what, I am not going to be a burden to you. I'm taking a stand on this. But why am I taking a stand on this? Oh, I'm just going to give it to those false teachers. No, that wasn't the point. His point was, for I do not seek yours, but you. Could you imagine me going out and try to convert people and saying, hey, listen, man, I really want you to become a Christian because you could really help us out financially on Sunday morning to give. Man, we could do so much for the church here. You're a lawyer. You're a doctor. You make a lot of money. We could really use that. That's shameful. That would be disgusting. Who cares about that? I don't care about your money. I care about you, not yours. Paul lets them know that. It's got nothing to do with it. Huh. I wonder who that hits between the eyes. Those false teachers. I keep having them over here. Those false teachers. They would be amongst them, though. You know, I care about you. No, they care about yours. They don't care about you. That's the big difference between me and them, as Paul is pointing out to them here. Gotta love it. For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. Bottom line. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the order that is there. And Paul looks at them with compassion. He says, I will very gladly spend and be spent for your souls, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I am loved. Parents, do you ever do something, great sacrifice, demonstrated your love towards your child, only to have them say, I hate you? Happens. If it hasn't happened, it'll happen. I'm not talking about that you giving them a gift and then they turn around and say, I hate you. You know, I'm talking about doing things out of love for them. All right, guys, we'll pick up there. I knew we wouldn't get far in that section, but finish out or read it again and be prepared next Sunday for discussion. Thank you for your participation. Chuck. Back on. All right. Okay.